How much precisely is a man supposed to sacrifice? And is there a way he can sacrifice where he isn't fucked if the woman he chose decides to fuck him?
It's a good question to ask yourself first, and I would also say, you know, if you're a woman who has trouble with men, or you're a man who has trouble with women, it's not the women and it's not the men, it's you.
Yes, but Mgtow isn't about men who have trouble with women. And here's where I think you fundamentally misunderstand what Mgtow is. Mgtow is about men who have trouble with a system and a culture that denies there's even such a thing as the negative feminine. Oh sure, you're allowed to acknowledge the archetype, but only as an unjust, arbitrary stereotype that exists for no other reason than to vilify and discriminate against women. You're allowed to acknowledge it exists, but only that it exists as an evil thing that should be stamped out. There's no truth to it. There are no bad women. When a marriage goes south, whatever the guy gets, he had it coming.
Because the women are telling you what's wrong with you, and the men are telling you what's wrong with you. And if you don't listen, then it's you. It's either you or all men.
No, it could be either you or all men, or it could be you or a system that allows men to abuse you and then justifies it by saying you were asking for it.
Well, that's easy, it's all men. Well, that's certainly how it's played out in the world right now.
And for a long time, Jordan. That's what feminism is. It's what it's always been. It's a set of stated grievances against men and the system feminists claim men and only men created, beginning with the Declaration of Sentiments and just taking it from there. To my mind, none of those grievances, as expressed, have ever held much water. But I don't think anyone could read the Declaration of Sentiments with any kind of critical eye and conclude it was anything other than a declaration of war against men. And now, 150 odd years later, finally, we have Mgtow. And what are they saying that's so awful? That a man needs a woman like a bicycle needs a fish? That any given woman has the option of destroying her male partner if she so chooses? And not only will the system allow it, it will hold him down and put its hand over his screaming mouth while she does it.
It's like, no, it's not all men. You can be by definition. And it's not all women, that's for sure.
Of course it isn't. But think about what Mgtow are really saying here. Don't involve yourself with a woman in such a way as to invite the system in. Now, way back when I was at the Liberty Forum in New Hampshire, I got invited onto a radio show. During the commercial break, one of the people who were in the room watching us in our little makeshift studio asked me if he should get married. And I asked him if he thought it was a good idea to sign a legally binding blank piece of paper, the legally binding terms of which would only be decided, possibly by a third party, at the time of its dissolution, and then enforced at the point of a gun. Would you sign that contract, Jordan? Because that's what marriage is these days for men. And perhaps it would be different if that third party that decides which clauses go where on that blank piece of paper, if that third party were a fair and just arbiter. But the family courts are notoriously biased against men, and the enforcement agencies are notoriously uninterested in anything but squeezing every penny they can out of divorced fathers. Got laid off? Laid on child support? Well, they take away your driver's license first, then your passport, then any professional licenses you have, and if that doesn't fix your attitude, off to jail you go. She refuses to give you the kids for your court-ordered visitation 3 months in a row? Well, if you've got any money left to take it to a judge, all he'll do is tell her to cut it out. No fines and no jail because she has custody and therefore the children would suffer any penalty along with her, you see. In fact, you might find yourself stuck paying her legal fees. Now, do all women do this? Nope. I didn't. But all women could if they wanted to, and the system will only help them do it. I was talking with Dr. Oren Amate, whom you know, a while back, and he told me he has seen some women in his practice who were just destroyed by family court, but one thing he did note is that these women tended to have married very charming, very manipulative sociopaths. That's what a man needs to be in order to destroy an ex-wife in family court. All a woman needs to be to destroy an ex-husband in family court is a woman. And I don't think a man needs to have a problem with all women to have enough of a problem with that to conclude that marriage isn't worth the risk.
I don't want to have anything to do with women. It's like you're a pathetic weasel. That's the same statement.
I get where you're coming from, Jordan. You're big on responsibility. You're big on the idea of improving oneself and voluntarily taking on obligations and commitments. And I think you're correct that it is responsibilities and not rights that infuse our lives with meaning. The things that provide us with the most satisfaction, our work, our families, our children, charity, even pets, all of those impose burdens on us and demand our willing sacrifice. But absent a framework of rights within which to do that, the burdens and sacrifices, even if they were taken on willingly, cease to become voluntary. What happens when marriage imposes social and legal obligations on men toward their wives, but none on women toward their husbands? When she's legally entitled to his money and his property, even after she's decided she doesn't want to be his wife anymore, but he has no legal entitlement to a relationship with his children. I mean, never mind the whole idea of, why am I still paying to support this woman when she's not cooking, cleaning for me, or sucking my dick? He's not even allowed to see his kids if she wants to be difficult. And what happens when a woman can access a man's money and property without him ever having chosen to take responsibility for her? Because here's the thing, Jordan. A few years ago, you said this on the agenda with Steve Paikin. And 150 years ago, you'd have been right.
See, the thing about being male is you have to voluntarily accept responsibility for a family.
Not anymore, Jordan. DNA paternity tests and default paternity judgments will assign responsibility to a man against his will and extract that responsibility from him come hell or high water. It might interest you to know that in Canada, when a man lies about birth control, he's guilty of sexual assault. And if that lie results in a pregnancy, that makes it aggravated sexual assault. But in Canada, if a woman lies about birth control and becomes pregnant, no crime has been committed, even though her perpetration of that fraud gives her access to a significant portion of her victim's income for 18 to 26 years. Now, if I lied in my business dealings in order to bilk money out of a client, that would be a crime. But if I lie in my sexual dealings and use that lie to bilk money out of a man, well, I haven't done anything wrong. Women have the right to informed consent in Canada, and men do not. Why? Because according to the judge in that case, if the potential resulting injury is not a physical one, it's not actually an injury. Now, none of this seems particularly voluntary to me, at least on the male end of things.
If you're a female, you don't have to do that, because as soon as you have a baby, you're basically forced into the position where you're going to take responsibility.
Not anymore. Women have access to morning after pills and abortions, and even more importantly, they have access to legal abandonment via safe haven or baby Moses laws. Any woman can leave her newborn at a police station or other designated place and walk away from any and all obligation to it. Of course, men have this same right in the de jure sense, in the strict legal sense of the statutes, but in order to actually exercise it in the real world that exists, they either need to secure the consent of the mother, or they must engage in custodial interference and kidnapping. Mothers have a default right to custody of newborns. Fathers have no such right. They must be gifted custody rights by the law or the mother, right? Through marriage or her acknowledgement of his rights, or granted them by a court of law. No man has the right to take a baby from a mother's unwilling arms and surrender it via a safe haven and absolve himself of responsibility for it. But women have every right and ability to conceal a pregnancy from the father and legally abandon a child. All 50 states in the U.S. have safe haven laws, but only 4 have any mechanisms whatsoever to locate the fathers of children so abandoned, and none, as far as I know, have ever enforced financial responsibility on the abandoning mother if and when the father takes custody of the child. At the same time, in all 50 states, even male victims of statutory rape can be compelled to pay child support to their rapists. And at the same time, they are compelled to spend their own money to attempt to secure parental rights via the courts, even when they've been identified as the fathers, and even if they are paying out of their paper routes to support the child.
But a male has to do that voluntarily.
Again, not anymore. According to biology and biology alone, yes, men must willingly take on responsibility for a family while women are forced to do so by default. But according to modern technological and legal standards, it's the exact opposite, Jordan. We have done everything in our power to relieve women of that responsibility through technological means like morning after pills and abortion, and through legal means like maternal surrender, legal abandonment of your child. And at the same time, we have done everything in our power to impose that responsibility on men, willing or otherwise, through technological means like DNA paternity assignment, and legal means like the forcible extraction of child support. Think about it, Jordan. This is government housing for women who can't afford to support their kids. And this is government housing for men who can't afford to support their kids.
And the rewards for that, fundamentally, at least to me, for the new generation, seems to have vanished.
Yeah, you said it yourself. Didn't you? The rewards for men have vanished. Whether they willingly take on the responsibility or have that responsibility forcibly extracted from them against their will, all of the rewards have vanished. Now, I want you to think about something, Jordan. Say you meet a girl. You're sweet on her. You want a relationship with her. Long term. She says she wants one with you, and she acts just like that. The two of you are getting intimate, and she assures you that she's on the pill, but unbeknownst to you, she's full of shit. You have sex with her. A month later, she stops returning your calls. You eventually get the picture and realize she didn't really want a relationship with you, and so you just move on with your life. A year later, you get a paycheck that's 3/5 of what it would normally be, with a notice that your wages are being garnished to pay child support. You didn't even know you had a kid. Now you're paying for one. So you call her up. She admits that she lied to you about birth control. She tells you she intentionally got pregnant against your wishes, and then she hid the pregnancy from you, and when she wanted to apply for some kind of social assistance or government benefit to help her out, she had to put your name down so the government could recoup some of its outlay. So sorry. Oh, and by the way, according to the law, she's done nothing wrong. Now, if you'd poked holes in the condoms, you'd be guilty of rape. But if she does the exact same thing, she's not even guilty of fraud. And if you fail or refuse to finance her unilateral decision and her hijacking of your life, if you refuse to do that for 18 to 26 years, you're guilty of felony child support evasion. And you wonder why there are men out there advising other men to steer clear of sexual relationships with women. It's not, and I will repeat this over and over, it's not that every woman would. It's that any woman can. And the law will not only allow her to do it, it will help her do it.
There's very little privilege, there's very little payment, there's very little stability.
There's plenty of stability. You better keep paying, Jordan. You better make yourself stable, because if you don't, you know where you're going. 3 hots in a cot every day, same time each afternoon for exercise out in the yard, and the same orange jumpsuit as everyone else. Very stable.
And so I see a lot of young men wondering, what am I supposed to do, and why is it that I would do what I'm supposed to do in the future? What's the gain?
There is no gain. There's no guarantee of permanence regarding an intimate relationship or of the permanence of your parental rights. As you said, there's very little payment, and the risks are huge. Would you play Russian roulette for a roll in the hay? For a relationship in which the woman is entitled to have expectations of you even after the entire thing goes south, but in which you're not entitled to expect anything of her? Here's the thing, Jordan. You don't really see what the gain is for many young men these days to willingly take on responsibility for a family. But these days, taking responsibility for a family is no longer a matter of being willing for men. DNA in the courts will decide for you whether you're willing or not. She lied to you? Doesn't matter. She tricked you? Doesn't matter. You played fair and she cheated? Doesn't matter. You never wanted kids, made that abundantly clear, and she circumvented your wishes by saving semen from oral sex or a used condom to impregnate herself? Doesn't matter. The system will force you to take responsibility for her choices. You said yourself that you don't see why young men would willingly take on these responsibilities for so little reward, stability, and gain. But when the mere act of ejaculating in the vicinity of a woman imposes a legal responsibility on a man without conferring on him any legal rights whatsoever, why on earth would you call men weasels for abstaining from having anything to do with women? Why would you do that?
And I don't really see what the gain is for many of them.
You've betrayed a fundamental misunderstanding of the problem, Jordan. The problem that has led to Mgtow. It's not that they have a problem with all women. It's that there is no social or legal contract between women and men anymore. Well, there is. It's just all the terms and clauses that connote responsibility apply to men, and all of the freedoms and the rights and entitlements apply to women. And you don't even need to sign on the dotted line to be held to that contract.